Captain Lee Hyun-woo stood in the center of the massive courtroom and felt very small. The Galactic Arbitration Council chamber was bigger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Crystal walls rose up into darkness above him, and alien voices echoed from every direction. Hundreds of different species sat in floating seats that moved around the room like fireflies. Some had tentacles instead of arms, and others looked like walking trees. A few were just balls of light that pulsed when they spoke. Ambassador Park, So Young, stood next to him with her hands folded behind her back. She had been Earth's voice in the galaxy for 10 years now. Her black hair was pulled back tight and her face showed no fear, even though they both knew this trial would decide the future of all humans everywhere. Dr. Kim Tae-ho sat at a small table behind them with his computer open. He was supposed to be helping with the defense, but Lee could see him taking notes about the alien species around them instead. High Arbiter Veltharion floated in the center of the room. The ancient being looked like a mountain made of blue crystal with lights moving, inside it like trapped lightning. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through caves. The Galactic Council has heard all evidence in the case of humanity versus the greater good. The human species stands accused of excessive aggression and dangerous expansion beyond their authorized space. Lee remembered the incident that started all this trouble. 3 human mining ships had crossed into the Tau Ceti system looking for rare metals. The hegemony of Keth claimed that space as their own, even though no one lived there. When their patrol ships tried to force the humans to leave, a fight broke out. No one died, but 2 Keth ships got damaged. The Keth made it sound like humans had declared war on the whole galaxy. Prosecutor Quindara clicked her way to the center of the chamber. She looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red when she was angry. Honored council members, the evidence is clear. Humanity has shown they cannot follow galactic law. They expand into any space they want. They fight anyone who tries to stop them. They are a species driven by violence and conquest, just like the ancient devourers who nearly destroyed our galaxy. Several aliens in the viewing areas made sounds of agreement. Lee had learned that comparing any species to the devourers was the worst insult possible in galactic politics. The devourers had been a race of killers who ate entire planets before the council finally stopped them 1,000 years ago. Ambassador Park stepped forward. Honored Arbiter, the prosecutor's claims are false. Humanity has followed all galactic laws since joining your community 50 years ago. The incident at Tau Ceti was a misunderstanding. Our mining ships had no weapons. When the Keth attacked them, our people only defended themselves. This is allowed under Council Law Section 47. But why were human ships there at all? Asked Council Member Thisara. She looked like a floating jellyfish made of silver metal. The Tau Ceti system was marked as contested space. Because no one told us, Park replied. The navigational charts we received from the Council showed that system as empty. If the Keth had a claim to it, that information was not shared with Earth. Lee watched the Council members whisper among themselves in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal or chirping birds. He could tell they were not really listening to Park's defense. They had already decided what they thought about humans. Dr. Kim leaned forward and whispered, Captain, most of these species are afraid of us. Look at their body language. The ones with tentacles are keeping them close to their bodies. The reptile-like ones have their neck frills raised for defense. They see us as predators. We are predators, Lee whispered back. But we're also builders and teachers and artists. They just don't want to see that part. High Arbiter Veltharion raised one crystal arm for silence. The Council has made its decision. Humanity has shown aggressive tendencies that threaten galactic peace. However, we do not believe in destruction when reformation is possible. Therefore, we sentence the human species to exile on Infernus 7 until such time as they can prove they have learned to control their violent nature. The chamber erupted in alien voices. Some sounded pleased while others seemed shocked. Lee had never heard of Infernus 7, but from the reactions around him, it was not a good place. Prosecutor Quindara's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. A wise decision, Honored Arbiter. Infernus 7 will teach these humans the value of peace. What exactly is Infernus 7? Ambassador Park asked. Council member Rixton answered. He was a tall, gray being with too many joints in his arms and legs. It is a world where we send those who cannot live peacefully with others. The climate is harsh and the native life forms are dangerous. Those sent there must learn to survive, without conquest or violence. Most learn quickly that cooperation is better than aggression. And if they don't learn, Park asked, then they do not survive, Veltharion said simply. The choice will be yours to make. Lee felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice calm. How many humans will be sent to this world? All of them, the High Arbiter replied. Every human currently living in galactic space will be transported to Infernus 7. Your homeworld of Earth will be quarantined until the Council decides humanity has been properly reformed. The words hit Lee like a physical blow. 50 million humans lived on colonies and space stations throughout the galaxy. Earth itself had 8 billion people. They were talking about exiling an entire species. Dr. Kim stood up suddenly. That's impossible. You can't move 50 million people to one world. The logistics alone would take years. We estimate 18 months for complete relocation, said Veltharion. The first ships will depart within 1 galactic standard month. Park stepped closer to the floating crystal being. Honored Arbiter, I must protest this decision. Humanity has committed no crime worthy of species-wide exile. A handful of mining ships in disputed space does not justify punishment for billions of people. The decision has been made, Veltharion said. The lights inside his crystal body pulsed, brighter. Your species will be given everything needed to survive on Infernus 7. Shelter materials, basic tools, medical supplies, and enough food for the first year. What you do after that will determine your future. Lee looked around the chamber, at hundreds of alien faces. Some watched with what might have been pity. Others seemed pleased to see humans brought low. A few appeared uncomfortable with the harsh sentence, but none spoke up to defend humanity. There is one more thing, added Council Member Thisara. Any human who wishes may choose individual exile instead. They would be allowed to live on designated worlds as refugees, but could never return to human space or contact other humans. How generous, Park said with ice in her voice. Break up our families and scatter us to the winds. The offer stands, Veltharion said. Guards, please escort the human delegation to their transport. 6 armed security beings in silver armor moved toward them. Lee held up his hand. We can walk ourselves. He turned to face the High Arbiter. You're making a mistake. Humans aren't monsters. We're builders and explorers. We came to the stars to learn and grow and make friends with other species. This punishment won't change who we are. Perhaps, Veltharion said, or perhaps Infernus 7 will teach your species humility. Time will tell. As they walked from the chamber, Lee heard alien voices discussing the sentence. Most seemed pleased that the dangerous humans would be contained. A few worried about what would happen to profitable trade agreements with human colonies. None seemed to care about the lives being destroyed. Outside the chamber, Ambassador Park finally let her professional mask slip. 18 months to relocate our entire civilization. They're not trying to reform us, Hyunwoo, they're trying to break us. Maybe, Lee replied, but they don't know us as well as they think they do. Humans have survived ice ages and plagues, and wars. We've lived in deserts and jungles and the vacuum of space. If they want to send us to hell, we'll just have to make it home. Dr. Kim was still taking notes on his computer. I've been analyzing their behavior patterns during the trial. Most of the council species are prey animals, or hive minds or energy beings. They think in terms of submission and dominance. They can't understand that humans can be both aggressive and cooperative depending on what the situation requires. Their mistake, Lee said as they boarded the transport that would take them back to Earth. And maybe our advantage. The ship lifted off from the crystal station and jumped to hyperspace. Through the porthole, Lee could see the neutron star that powered the council's seat of government. Soon they would be heading in the opposite direction to a world the aliens called Hell. But Lee had been a soldier for 20 years before becoming a diplomat. He knew that sometimes you had to go through hell to get where you needed to be. The aliens thought they were ending humanity's story in the galaxy, but Lee suspected they were just starting a new chapter. The prison transport shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Infernus 7, and Major Choi Jin-ae gripped her seat harder. Through the small porthole she could see orange clouds that looked like fire and lightning that never stopped flashing. The ship dropped through layer after layer of storms until finally breaking through into clear air above a landscape that looked like something from a nightmare. Red sand stretched to the horizon in every direction. Strange rock formations twisted up from the desert floor like the bones of giant creatures. In the distance she could see what looked like cities, but they were dark and crumbling. The only signs of life were small groups of structures scattered across the wasteland like infected wounds. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your new home," announced the mechanical voice of the ship's computer. "Current surface temperature is 48 degrees Celsius. Wind speed is 60 kilometers per hour with gusts up to 100. Atmospheric composition is breathable for most species, but contains high levels of sulfur compounds and metal particles. Recommended exposure time for unprotected organics is 4 hours maximum." Lieutenant Commander Yoon Dae-sung looked up from his instruments. "The good news is we can breathe it. The bad news is everything else." He was the best pilot in the Earth Defense Force and had volunteered to come on the first transport to help set up landing zones for the ships that would follow. Dr. Shin Yoon-ji checked her medical scanner. "The radiation levels are elevated but not immediately dangerous. The metal particles in the air will cause lung irritation over time. The sulfur compounds will make everything smell like rotten eggs." She had been Earth's top biochemist before, volunteering for this mission. Like many of the first wave, she came because someone had to, and she knew her skills would be needed. The transport touched down with a hard bump on what used to be a landing pad. Through the speakers, they could hear wind howling outside and something that sounded like metal scraping against metal. The main door opened with a hiss, and hot air rushed in carrying the smell of sulfur and decay. Warden Krextool waited for them, at the bottom of the ramp. The cybernetic being looked like someone had tried to build a person out of spare machine parts. Half his face was metal with a red glowing eye, while the other half was pale flesh covered in scars. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding gears. "Welcome to Infernus 7 humans. I am Warden Krextool, and I have overseen this world for 300 standard years. Let me explain the rules because I will only say them once." The 10,000 humans from the first transport gathered around the warden in the blazing heat. Most wore the simple gray uniforms they had been given on the prison ship. Some carried small bags with personal items, but that was all they had been allowed to bring. "Rule 1, Krextool continued. "There are no rules. This world belongs to whoever is strong enough to take it. Rule 2, there are no guards. I watch from my station in orbit, but I do not interfere. Rule 3, if you die, you stay dead. We do not waste medical resources on the weak." Captain Lee, Hyun-woo stepped forward from the crowd. "What about food and shelter?" Krextool pointed toward the ruined cities in the distance. "There are abandoned structures throughout this world. Most are damaged, but some can be repaired. As for food, there are plants and animals native to this world. Some are edible, some are poisonous, some will try to eat you first. Learning which is part of your education. How many others are on this world?" asked Major Choi. "Approximately 40,000 beings from 300 different species, all sent here for the same reason as you, all learning the same lessons." The warden's metal eye focused on her. "The Vrex control the northern wastes. The Korthak hive has claimed the eastern mountains. The Crimson Fang holds the southern oasis, and in the deep caves live the scorned." "Who are the scorned?" Dr. Shin asked. "Failures. Genetic experiments that went wrong. Species that tried to evolve beyond their limitations and became something else instead. They were the first to be sent here 50 years ago. Now they are part of the world itself." Lieutenant Commander Yoon raised his hand. "What happens if we want to leave?" Krextool made a sound that might have been laughter. "You are free to try. The orbital defense grid will destroy any ship that attempts to depart without proper authorization. Authorization requires proof that you have learned to control your violent tendencies and live in harmony with others." "How is that measured?" Lee asked. "When I decide you are ready, I will inform the Galactic Council. They will send inspectors to evaluate your progress. If you pass their tests, some of you may be allowed to leave. If not, You remain here until you die or learn. The warden turned to walk away, then stopped. One final piece of advice, humans. This world breaks the proud and kills the stupid. Your species has a reputation for being both. Perhaps that will change. As the cybernetic being disappeared into the wasteland, the humans stood in silence looking at their new home. The twin suns were setting, turning the sky the color of blood. In the distance they could hear howling sounds that definitely did not come from any animal they knew. "Well," said Captain Lee finally, "let's get organized." Within hours the humans had established a perimeter around the landing zone using salvaged metal from crashed ships. Major Choi took charge of fortifications, while Lieutenant Commander Yoon organized scouting parties to map the immediate area. Dr. Shin set up a medical station in the wreck of an old transport and began testing the local plants and water sources. The first night was hard. The temperature dropped to -30 degrees, and the wind brought stinging sand that got into everything. Strange creatures circled their camp, making sounds like crying children. Some of the humans wanted to light fires for warmth, but Lee ordered them to stay dark. Fire would attract attention they were not ready for. On the second day, Yoon's scouts found a water source 3 kilometers north of the landing zone. It was an underground stream that bubbled up through cracks in the rock. The water was bitter and smelled bad, but Dr. Shin confirmed it was safe to drink after boiling. "The mineral content is actually beneficial," she reported to Lee. "High in iron and calcium. The sulfur compounds that make it taste terrible also have antibacterial properties." They also found their first ruins on the second day, a cluster of buildings made from some kind of ceramic material that was harder than steel. Most were damaged by centuries of storms, but a few were intact enough to provide shelter. Major Choi's teams began immediate repairs using materials salvaged from the landing zone. On the third day, they met the Scorned. Yoon was leading a patrol north toward the water source when his team spotted movement in the rocks ahead. At first, they thought it was some kind of large animal, but as it got closer, they realized it was walking upright. When it stepped into the open, they saw something that might have been humanoid once, but was now something else entirely. The creature was tall and thin with gray skin that looked like old leather. Its arms were too long and ended in hands with too many fingers. Where its face should have been, there was a mass of tentacles surrounding a single large eye. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through broken glass. "New meat," it said, in accented galactic standard. "Fresh and stupid. The Scorned welcome you to hell." More creatures emerged from the rocks. All were different, but all had the same look of beings that had been changed by forces beyond their control. Some walked on legs while others slithered. A few floated above the ground surrounded by clouds of dust. Yoon kept his hand near his sidearm but did not draw it. "We're human. We were sent here by the Galactic Council." "We know," said the first creature. "We watched your ships arrive. I am Vex, leader of this clan. Once I was Alterian before the experiments changed me. Now I am Scorned. What do you want?" asked one of Yoon's soldiers. "To see if you break like the others. Most new arrivals die in the first week. They fight what they cannot understand. They waste energy on anger and despair. But you humans are different." "How so?" Vex moved closer and his single eye studied Yoon carefully. "You organize. You plan. You work together instead of fighting each other. Even now your people are building, while others would be hiding." That evening, Vex visited the human camp. Lee met him at the perimeter with Major Choi and Dr. Shin. The Scorned leader looked around at the shelters they had built and the defensive positions they had established. "Impressive," he said. "Most species sent here spend their first months fighting over scraps. You have created order from chaos." "We do what works," Lee replied. "Fighting each other wastes energy we need to survive. The others will not see it that way. The Vrex believe strength comes from domination. The Korthok think only of expanding their hive. The Crimson Fang takes whatever they want from whoever is too weak to stop them." "Let them come," Major Choi said. "We'll be ready." Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. "You have 40 Scorned watching your camp right now. You detected none of them. The Crimson Fang has 200 warriors and weapons scavenged from a century of failed escape attempts. You have courage, human, but courage without wisdom is suicide. Dr. Shin stepped forward. What do you suggest? Alliance. The Scorned know this world better than any other group. We know where to find food and shelter. We know which creatures to avoid and which can be hunted. Engineer Nam Ki-jun wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the atmospheric processor come online. The machine was built from parts salvaged from crashed ships and scavenged alien technology, but it worked better than anything the Galactic Council had ever designed. Purple lights flickered across its surface as it began converting the poisonous atmosphere of Infernus 7 into something humans could breathe without filters. Oxygen levels are up 3% in the last week, reported biologist Kang Yu-jin from her monitoring station. The sulfur compounds are down by 15%. At this rate, we'll have breathable air over the entire settlement within 6 months. 6 months? Nam could hardly believe how much had changed since the first humans arrived on this hell world. What started as a desperate fight for survival had become something much more ambitious. The humans were not just adapting to Infernus 7, they were transforming it. The settlement had grown into a proper town that people were calling New Seoul. Streets laid out in neat grids connected residential areas to workshops and factories. Central Plaza held markets where humans traded with their growing number of alien allies. Children played in parks that had been bare sand just months ago, but now grew earth plants adapted to the local soil. The hydroponic gardens are producing enough food to feed 20,000 people, Kang continued. The bacterial cultures we developed can break down local plant matter into nutritious protein. We're actually eating better here than most people do on Earth. Nam nodded as he watched families of different species walking through the streets below. Humans worked alongside Scorned who had become skilled craftsmen. Altarian refugees who had joined them after escaping from other parts of the world shared their advanced mathematics with human engineers. Even a few Korthak drones had left their hive to join the growing community. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Warlord Grakthanor stood on a ridge overlooking New Seoul and felt his rage growing hotter than the desert sun. The massive Thrakari warrior was covered in scars from 100 battles, and his forearms each held weapons taken from enemies he had killed. Behind him waited 200 of his Crimson Fang raiders, all eager for the fight their leader had promised them. Look at them, he snarled to his lieutenant Vashitar. Playing at civilization like children with toys. They have forgotten this is a world for warriors, not farmers and merchants. Vashitar shifted nervously. The smaller Thrakari had been watching the humans for weeks, and what he saw worried him. Warlord, perhaps we should reconsider this attack. The humans have fortified their settlement well. They have allies among the Scorned and the Altarians. Their weapons may be primitive, but they have superior numbers. Numbers mean nothing without the will to use them, Grakthanor replied. These soft humans have never faced the Crimson Fang in battle. When we sweep down from the hills, they will break and run like all the others. In the settlement below, Sergeant First Class Baek Hyun-soo was thinking the same thing in reverse. The career soldier had been expecting an attack from the raiders for weeks. His scouts reported movement in the hills, and his sensors detected energy signatures from weapons being charged. The Crimson Fang was finally ready to test themselves against the humans. All defensive positions report ready, came the voice of Corporal Park over the communication system. Artillery teams have targets locked. Sniper teams are in position. Medical stations are prepared for casualties. Beck smiled grimly as he checked his rifle one more time. Let them come. The raiders had spent decades bullying smaller groups and taking whatever they wanted from those too weak to fight back. They had no idea what they were about to face. The attack came at dawn, just as Baek had predicted. Grakthanor led the charge, himself screaming battle cries as his raiders poured down from the hills on stolen vehicles and captured flying machines. Energy weapons lit up the morning sky, and the thunder of explosions echoed off the canyon walls. The warlord expected to smash through whatever pathetic defenses the humans had managed to build, then scatter their forces with a display of superior firepower. Instead, his first wave of attackers ran straight into a killing field that had been planned down to the smallest detail. Hidden gun positions opened fire from concealed bunkers. Artillery shells landed exactly where Bayek's spotters directed them. Mines exploded under the wheels of raider vehicles while sniper fire picked off their drivers. Within minutes, the unstoppable charge had turned into chaos and confusion. "What is this?" roared Grak'Thanor as explosions erupted around his command vehicle. "Where are their warriors? Why do they fight from hiding like cowards?" "It's called tactics," said a calm voice behind him. The warlord spun around to find a human soldier standing on the rear platform of his vehicle. Beck had used the confusion of the battle to get close enough for a personal conversation. His rifle was trained on Grak'Thanor's head, but his finger was not on the trigger. "You're surrounded," Beck continued. "Your attack force is cut to pieces. Half your people are dead, and the other half are trapped in crossfire zones. I'm offering you one chance to surrender." Grak'Thanor's response was to swing one of his massive weapons at the human's head. Beck ducked under the blow and fired 3 rounds into the warlord's chest. The giant alien fell backward off his own vehicle and landed in the sand with a crash that shook the ground. The battle was over in less than an hour. Most of the Crimson Fang raiders were dead or wounded, and those still alive were taken prisoner. The humans had lost only 12 people, and most of those were injured rather than killed. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of Infernus 7, but the real surprise came after the fighting ended. Instead of executing the surviving raiders or throwing them into prison camps, the humans offered them a choice: join the community and help build something better, or face exile to the deepest part of the wasteland where even the scorned would not go. Most chose to join. Vashtar found himself working alongside engineer Nam on the atmospheric processors. The former raider's technical skills made him valuable despite his violent past. Other Crimson Fang members became construction workers and farmers and merchants. A few even joined the security forces that protected the settlement. "I don't understand," Vashtar said to Nam as they installed a new filtration system. "We attacked your people. We killed your friends. Why do you welcome us?" Nam paused in his work and looked at the alien who had been his enemy just days ago. "Because fighting each other is a waste of energy and talent. You're good with machines. We need people who are good with machines. What happened before doesn't matter as much as what happens next." The transformation of the raiders was just one example of how human philosophy was changing life on Infernus 7. The collective mind, Zurvok, had been imprisoned for developing technology the Galactic Council considered too dangerous. Their crime was thinking too much and asking too many questions about the nature of reality. When they encountered humans, they found beings who shared their curiosity and love of innovation. Soon the hive mind was sharing advanced physics concepts with human scientists, while human engineers helped them build new types of quantum computers. Together, they developed technology that made life on the harsh world not just bearable, but comfortable. "Your species has an unusual approach to problem solving," observed Zurvok during one of their collaborative sessions. The collective spoke through a biomechanical interface that looked like a tree made of silver wire and glowing crystals. "Most beings we encounter think in linear patterns. Humans think in networks and spirals." Dr. Shin looked up from the medical scanner she was modifying with Zurvok technology. "What do you mean?" When faced with a challenge, most species either fight it head-on or avoid it entirely. Humans seem to approach problems from multiple angles simultaneously. You adapt the environment to fit your needs while also adapting yourselves to fit the environment. That adaptation was visible everywhere in New Seoul. Streets were designed to channel the constant wind into power generators. Buildings used local materials but were shaped to withstand the violent storms. Gardens grew earth plants that had been genetically modified to thrive in alien soil, while also incorporating native species that provided unique benefits. The cultural mixing was just as remarkable. Human children learned mathematics from Alterian scholars who taught using concepts of beauty and harmony. Scorned craftsmen shared techniques for working with materials that responded to thought rather than physical tools. Former raiders taught combat skills to human soldiers who taught them strategy and tactics in return. But the most profound change was happening in the people themselves. Warden Krextul watched from orbit as crime rates dropped to nearly zero. Violence between different species became rare and usually involved newcomers who had not yet learned the community's values. Even more surprising, the various groups were starting to develop a shared culture that combined elements from dozens of different backgrounds. "This should not be possible," he reported to his superiors at the Galactic Council. "Prison worlds are supposed to break dangerous species down into manageable fragments. Instead, the humans are creating something I have never seen before." High Arbiter Veltharion reviewed the reports with growing concern. Infrared imaging showed massive construction projects covering. Inspector Thielos had investigated dozens of prison worlds during his long career with the Galactic Council, but he had never seen anything like this. His shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Infernus 7, and instead of the wasteland described, in official reports he saw green fields and gleaming cities. Rivers flowed where there should have been only sand, and forests grew where nothing should have been able to survive. "Landing clearance granted, Inspector Thielos," came a professional voice over the communication system. "Please proceed to Landing Bay 7 at the main spaceport. Welcome to Haven." Haven. They were calling it Haven now instead of Infernus 7. The insectoid inspector clicked his mandibles in irritation as his shuttle touched down on a landing pad that was cleaner and more modern than most facilities in core galactic worlds. Through the viewport, he could see humans and aliens working together to service the various ships that had come to trade with this impossible place. Admiral Lim Seung-ho was waiting for him at the bottom of the shuttle ramp. The human military officer wore a crisp uniform with the insignia of the Haven Defense Force and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Behind him stood an honor guard that included representatives from a dozen different species. "Inspector, welcome to Haven," Lim said with a formal bow. "I hope your journey was comfortable. President Park is eager to meet with you and answer any questions you might have about our progress here." President Park. Thielos remembered when Park So-young had been just another human diplomat arguing hopelessly before the Galactic Council. Now she was the elected leader of what appeared to be a thriving interstellar nation. The inspector followed Lim through streets that bustled with activity and showed no signs of the violence and chaos that were supposed to characterize prison worlds. "The transformation has been remarkable," Lim continued as they walked. "When the first humans arrived 2 years ago, this was indeed hell. But we've learned that hell is just another place that needs good engineering and hard work to become home." They passed parks where children of multiple species played together under artificial suns that provided warmth without the harsh radiation of the system's twin stars. They saw workshops where former criminals had become respected craftsmen. They witnessed markets where goods flowed freely between communities that should have been at each other's throats. Thielos stopped at a construction site where a massive building was taking shape. The architecture combined human practicality with alien aesthetics in ways he had never seen before. Workers from a dozen different worlds collaborated on tasks that required trust and coordination between natural enemies. "What is this structure?" he asked. "The new university," replied Chief Engineer Ryu Jaewon, who had joined their group. "We're importing professors from throughout the galaxy to teach courses in everything from quantum physics to artistic expression. Education is one of our fastest-growing industries." The inspector's compound eyes focused on the human engineer. "Industries? This is supposed to be a punishment facility, not a commercial center." Ryu smiled and gestured toward the bustling streets around them. "Inspector, we learned a long time ago that punishment and progress don't have to be mutually exclusive. The Council sent us here to become better people. We decided the best way to do that was to build a better world." The presidential palace was a modest building by galactic standards, but it hummed with the activity of a functioning government. Thielos was escorted through halls where humans worked alongside former enemies to solve the complex problems of running a multi-species democracy. The offices were filled with the sounds of different languages and the sight of beings who should have been fighting instead, working together toward common goals. President Park received him in a simple room with large windows that looked out over the city. She had aged since their last meeting, but carried herself with the dignity of someone who had accomplished the impossible. Beside her sat Counselor Go Min-jung, who had once been a minor Earth politician, but was now one of the galaxy's most respected legal scholars. "Inspector Thielos," Park said, rising from her desk. "Thank you for coming to evaluate our progress. I hope you find that we have learned the lessons the Council hoped to teach us. The inspector settled his 6 legs and studied the 2 humans carefully. The lessons were supposed to teach you humility and peace through suffering. Instead, you appear to have built a paradise. Paradise is a strong word, Go interjected. We've simply applied human problem-solving skills to the challenges of this world. When life gives you a desert, you dig for water. When life gives you toxic air, you build better filters. When life gives you enemies, you find ways to make them into friends. Thyalos clicked through the data on his scanner. According to my readings, this world now has a population approaching 2 million beings from over 300 species. Crime rates are below galactic average. Economic productivity exceeds that of many core worlds. Most significantly, military has been involved in peacekeeping operations in 3 neighboring systems, all at the request of the local governments. Admiral Lim added, We found that our mixed species forces are more effective at resolving conflicts than traditional single-species militaries. That brings us to the legal question, Go said, sliding a thick document across the desk to the inspector. According to Galactic Law Article 847, any group that establishes a functioning government on an unclaimed world for a period of 2 standard years may petition for recognition as a sovereign state. Thyalos felt his mandibles click involuntarily as he scanned the document. It was exactly what he had been afraid of. The humans had not simply survived their punishment, they had turned it into the foundation for a new galactic power. Worse, they appeared to have done it all within the bounds of existing law. Infernus 7 is not an unclaimed world, he protested. It is a designated punishment facility under council jurisdiction. Was a punishment facility, Park corrected. The moment the council abandoned direct administration and left us to govern ourselves, it became unclaimed territory under galactic law. We've simply exercised our right to establish a legitimate government. The inspector spent 3 days touring Haven and interviewing citizens from dozens of species. What he found challenged everything he thought he knew about interstellar society. Former criminals had become respected leaders. Natural enemies had formed friendships that spanned species. Barriers, most shocking of all, the harsh world that was supposed to break dangerous spirits had become a beacon of hope for outcasts throughout the galaxy. Queen Velandra greeted him in her restored palace in what was now the diplomatic quarter of New Sol. The rightful ruler of the Alterian Empire had been framed and imprisoned by rivals who wanted her throne. On Haven, she had found justice and purpose working with humans who cared more about her abilities than her past troubles. Your species has a unique gift, she told Thyalos over dinner prepared by a chef who had once been a Korthak warrior. You see potential where others see only problems. When the council sent you here, they expected you to be broken by this world. Instead, you broke the world's power to harm and rebuilt it as something beautiful. The collective mind Zurvak offered a different perspective during their meeting in the quantum research facility they had built with human partners. Humans think in patterns we find fascinating. Most species approach challenges with rigid strategies based on their biological limitations. Humans adapt their strategies to match whatever the situation requires. They gave us exile and we built a nation, added Vex, who now served as Minister of Integration. The former scorned leader had helped thousands of refugees from other worlds find new lives on Haven. They gave us hell and we planted gardens. They meant to teach us a lesson about power and we learned a lesson about possibility instead. On his final day, Thyalos toured the orbital facilities that Admiral Lim's people had constructed around the world. Shipyards built vessels that combined technology from dozens of species into designs more efficient than anything in the galactic fleet. Communication arrays connected Haven with trading partners throughout the local sector. Most impressive of all was the defense grid that could protect the world from any conceivable attack. You've built all this in just 2 years? The inspector asked. Desperation is a powerful motivator, Lim replied. When survival depends on innovation, you innovate or die. We chose to innovate. The transport back to the Galactic Council carried more than just Inspector Thyalos. It also held trade delegates from Haven, along with samples of technology and cultural products that demonstrated the world's transformation. The inspector's report would shock the Council, but the evidence was undeniable. High Arbiter Veltharion, read the report in his crystal chambers while images of Haven played on holographic displays around him. Cities where there should have been ruins, forests where there should have been wasteland, thriving communities where there should have been scattered survivors fighting over scraps. "This is impossible," he said to Council Member Thisara. "Prison, worlds do not become utopias. Exiled species do not build interstellar civilizations. The humans were supposed to learn humility, not become a major power." "Perhaps they have learned humility," Thisara suggested. President Park So-young stood before the same Galactic Arbitration Council that had exiled her species 5 years ago. But everything had changed. Where once she had pleaded for mercy as a desperate ambassador, now she commanded respect as the elected leader of one of the galaxy's most prosperous worlds. The crystalline chamber looked smaller than she remembered, and the alien faces that had seemed so intimidating now watched her with curiosity and barely concealed admiration. "Ambassador?" Lee Hyun-woo stood beside her wearing the formal robes of Haven's diplomatic corps. The former military captain had become one of the galaxy's most skilled negotiators through years of building alliances between species that had been enemies for centuries. Behind them sat Secretary of State Hwang Min-seo, with a folder containing treaties and trade agreements that would reshape galactic commerce. High Arbiter Veltharion floated in the center of the chamber as before, but his crystal body seemed dimmed by age and uncertainty. When he spoke, his voice lacked the commanding authority it had possessed during humanity's trial. "President Park, the Galactic Council recognizes your presence and your petition for full membership in our community. Your achievements on Infernus 7 have been noted and evaluated." "Haven," Park corrected gently. "The world is called Haven now, Honored Arbiter. Infernus 7 was the name of a place that no longer exists." Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their floating seats. The name change was more than symbolic, it represented a complete transformation of their understanding about punishment and redemption. What they had intended as a place of suffering had become a beacon of hope for outcasts throughout the galaxy. Chancellor Nixtal materialized as a column of shifting energy. "The Council has reviewed Inspector Thalos's report, along with additional data provided by your delegation. The evidence of Haven's achievements is compelling. Population growth, economic development, technological innovation, and most remarkably, the successful integration of over 300 different species into a functioning democracy." Council Member Thisara drifted closer to the human delegation. "Your crime statistics are particularly impressive. How does a world populated entirely by exiles and criminals achieve crime rates below galactic average?" Secretary Hwang stood to answer. "When people have hope for the future, they're less likely to destroy the present. When different groups work together toward common goals, they have less time and energy for fighting each other. We learned early that cooperation produces better results than competition." "But surely there have been conflicts," pressed Council Member Rixton. "Our files show that Haven's population includes members of species that have been at war for millennia." "There have been disagreements," Park acknowledged. "But we've developed systems for resolving disputes through dialogue and compromise rather than violence. When a Korthak hive mind and an Alterian individualist can work together on the same construction project, you realize that most conflicts come from misunderstanding rather than genuine incompatibility." The chamber buzzed with alien voices discussing this revelation. Many council species had accepted eternal warfare between natural enemies as an unavoidable fact of galactic life. The idea that such conflicts could be resolved through better communication challenged fundamental assumptions about interstellar relations. Fleet Admiral Choi Jin-ae entered the chamber, accompanied by military representatives from a dozen allied worlds. The former engineering major had become one of the galaxy's most respected naval commanders through her role in peacekeeping operations that had ended 3 separate wars in Haven's local sector. Admiral Choi called High Arbiter Veltharion. "Your military forces have been active beyond Haven's territorial boundaries. Explain these activities." Choi stepped forward with the confident bearing of someone who had never lost a battle. "Haven Defense Forces have responded to requests for assistance from legitimate governments facing internal conflicts. In each case, our mixed-species crews, were able to resolve disputes that single-species militaries could not handle. Mixed species crews. Humans work well with other species because we understand that diversity creates strength. A scorned engineer can repair damage that would cripple human technology. Altarian navigators can calculate hyperspace jumps with precision that human computers cannot match. Korthak warriors provide tactical insights that human strategists would never consider. General Kim Tae-ho joined them carrying data tablets containing detailed analyses of Haven's military capabilities. The former xenobiologist had become a master of asymmetric warfare by studying how different species could complement each other in combat situations. Our forces are not the largest in the galaxy, he reported, but they may be the most effective. When you combine human adaptability with alien specialized skills, you create capabilities that no single species military can match. The council members exchanged glances that conveyed both admiration and concern. A military force that could outfight traditional fleets with smaller numbers represented a significant shift in galactic power balance. The humans had not simply survived their exile, they had emerged as a major player in interstellar affairs. President Park gestured to Ambassador Lee, who activated a holographic projector that filled the chamber with images of Haven's transformation. The council watched in fascination as barren wastelands became thriving cities, and scattered refugee camps evolved into organized neighborhoods where former enemies lived as neighbors. 5 years ago, you sent humanity to Infernus 7 to teach us humility, Park said as the images continued. You succeeded beyond your expectations. We learned that true strength comes not from dominating others but from helping them achieve their potential. We learned that the greatest victories are won not on battlefields but in classrooms and workshops and council chambers where people work together to solve problems. The images showed children of multiple species learning together in schools that taught both galactic standard curriculum and unique cultural traditions. They showed research facilities where scientists from dozens of worlds collaborated on projects that benefited entire sectors. Most powerfully, they showed former criminals who had become respected leaders through their contributions to their adopted communities. We learned that exile can become opportunity if you approach it with the right attitude, Lee added. That punishment can become education if you're willing to listen to what the universe is trying to teach you. That hell itself can become heaven if you're prepared to do the work required for transformation. High Arbiter Veltharion was silent for a long moment as he processed what he had seen and heard. Around the chamber, other council members waited for his response. The ancient being's crystal body pulsed with patterns of light that indicated deep thought and internal conflict. The council recognizes that our understanding of justice and rehabilitation was incomplete, he finally said. We believed that suffering would teach your species to abandon aggression. Instead, you taught us that aggression properly channeled becomes the force that builds civilizations rather than destroys them. Chancellor Nixtal's energy form brightened. The petition for full galactic citizenship is approved. Haven is recognized as a sovereign member of the galactic community, with all rights and privileges thereunto. Furthermore, the Council formally apologizes for the error in judgment that led to humanity's exile. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval from species that had been watching the proceedings with growing fascination. Many had sent observers to Haven and returned with reports of innovations and social solutions they wanted to implement in their own societies. The human experiment had become a model that others were eager to copy. There is one additional matter, added Council Member Thaisara. Haven has been invited to establish a permanent embassy here at the Council Station. Furthermore, President Park has been nominated to serve as special advisor on multi-species integration. Park smiled at the irony. 5 years ago, she had stood in this chamber as a defendant pleading for her species' survival. Now she was being asked to help other civilizations learn the lessons that humans had discovered through necessity and desperation. I accept the nomination with gratitude, she replied. Haven's greatest export has always been hope. If we can help other worlds find the same opportunities we discovered, then our transformation will have meaning beyond our own success. The formal ceremony concluded with treaty signings that established Haven as a full partner in galactic affairs. Trade agreements were finalized that would bring Haven's innovations to worlds throughout the galaxy. Defense pacts were signed that would allow Haven's peacekeeping forces to operate wherever they were needed. But the real celebration began when the session ended, and delegates from hundreds of worlds surrounded the human representatives with questions and requests for assistance. Everyone wanted to know how former enemies could become allies, how criminals could become citizens, how hell could become heaven through nothing more than hard work and the willingness to see potential where others saw only problems. Fleet Admiral Choi found herself surrounded by military officers eager to learn about multi-species unit organization. General Kim was bombarded with requests for tactical assessments and strategic planning consultations.